town of the good, the bad, and the weird. You either live by the gun, or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the good, the bad, and the weird. I'm Betty.
And I'm the chosen one. Outside the wall.
And if you haven't guessed yet, today we're talking about Kung Pow. And as my drink, I have milk. Should I be drinking this? No, but I'm gonna.
I've just gotta have water. I've had so much caffeine today. I'm exhausted. So we're covering a 2000 film.
Yes.
I think 2001 that almost no one really knows about, or a fair amount knows, but
it has definitely made its way into a cult classic status. But I wouldn't say it is the large majority cult, you know?
Yes.
This is, like, the people who have seen this movie, love this movie, live for this movie, or have, like, put it in the back of their mind, hope to never see it again.
Like my mom, who has never seen the movie in full, despite it being a family classic, and conveniently falls asleep every single time we put it in.
Yes, and as we watched this movie, I thought to myself, I need to get this to my brother as soon as we're done recording. This is the sort of movie that he would absolutely love.
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory behind the movie. So it's a combination of 50% new footage and 50% old footage from a movie either known as Tiger and Crane Style or Savage Killers.
Yes, and I will say, as someone who I watched this one, then realized that the old footage was all from one movie, so I immediately needed to go watch that movie. Mm-hmm. Tiger and Crane Style was both unnecessarily difficult and scarily easy to get a hold of in the same instance.
Well, that's part of the reason they used the movie, is because they could get the rights for it, because it was a 70s Hong Kong film that
yes.
I think it's like public domain? Something like that, or the copyright had lapsed or didn't really have one at the time.
I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't have one. So the version I could find / get my hands on was an English dubbed version. I got it for free on YouTube.
They do have the Chinese version. It's just really bad film quality, and you can barely read the subtitles.
I'm kind of glad I watched the English dub version, because it kind of looked to me like whoever had the movie that they put up for free entertainment to watch on YouTube, which questionable on whether or not that was supposed to happen or not. Couldn't find it on literally any other platform, so, I'm going to watch it how I can.
Yeah.
But it looked very much like they recorded it off a VHS player, and then snipped out every piece of audio, threw that away, and then made their own audio. And I almost want to say they did a worse job of making their own audio than the Kung Pow version of this movie. Because, example, they're standing in the field, trying to impress a girl. I don't know, a lot of stuff was lost in translation in this dub. Mm-hmm. So he's punching things. Imagine a man standing in a field, punching nothing, not even grass. And every single move he makes goes whoosh, whoosh.
Shadowboxing.
It sounded a lot like those old Street Fighter sort of like video games where like literally every move you made some sort of sound, and it doesn't match your action.
I did consider watching Street Fighter for this as well, but I ended up watching a few other kung fu movies on Netflix, or no, not Netflix, Amazon, yes. And they are all dubbed.
Yes, they are, and
they are so bad. They are the films are. The film themselves are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just the dubbing is god awful.
And I feel like Kung Pow, which, in case you didn't know, was written, directed, and starred all one person, who also did all of the voiceover.
Yes, he did.
With the exception of one person, I think.
He was not Uniboob Chick.
Uniboob Chick, I think, was the only person who voiced herself. But she did her scene. They removed the audio from that scene, and then she voiced over herself.
They did that for everything.
They did.
They have a whole audio track of him saying, like, what he actually said, and then the actual language film. But they don't have put subtitles in it either, so you don't even know what they're saying to begin with.
No, and the original film...
Unless you speak Chinese, but...
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't speak any Chinese. unfortunately, I kind of wish I do, or that I did when I watched the original, because I understand a little bit more why they picked that movie.
Mm-hmm.
The plot, I kind of got. So in the original one is somehow very similar to the remake. So the original one, there's a kung fu school. There's a tiger kung fu school and a crane kung fu school.
Shocker.
I know, right? And there's a master student from each one, and they have to get over their differences, come together to defeat the Claw Man, who I never did quite catch his actual name.
Oh, I see. Okay, so for those listening, Chris watched the actual film. I did not.
Yes.
We chose this specifically so that way
Yeah.
I could do my own little avenue. Plus, I was out of town all weekend for a wedding, so
It wasn't a short film. It was like an hour and 40 minutes worth of kung fu movie, which for back then, that's pretty long.
yeah.
Especially for a film that had almost too much dialogue. I now see why they picked this film, because there's plenty of shots of people standing around talking that they could dub over to make their own story, which was almost the same as the original story. The kid in Kung Pow, what's his name, Wimpy Fu or something like that? Wimplo. The one who they purposefully teach to
Train
not-
wrong.
Yes.
On purpose, as a joke.
The one who learned...
With squeaky shoes.
He had squeaky shoes, which was killing me the whole movie.
Oh, I should do that for Halloween for The Office. Just keep walking around with squeak, 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 squeak.
My neighbor in my apartment, her little girl has squeaky tennis shoes, and you can hear her from like a mile away, and that's all I could think of the whole time he was on set. But his footage in the original movie is very similar to his Kung Pow. Instead of having been taught wrong, though, he was taught crane style, but he spends a lot of time not trying to learn tiger style, so it's a lot of very limp-wristed kung fu stances. And
Hyuga and Naruto.
yeah, there was a lot of very Naruto-esque, like, funny moments, especially if you've seen Naruto. They weren't obvious, like, this is way before that was a thing. But
yeah,
you definitely could have a good giggle if you'd seen both.
No, well, the movie, are we gonna call it Savage Killer? Yeah, let's just call it Savage Killers.
Let's call it Savage
for
Killers.
Short.
Well, especially because if you try and find it using the name Tiger Crane Style, you get a lot of videos of actual, of the actual Tiger and Crane Style demonstrations.
Or you get, if you do it on Amazon, you get a buttload of other kung fu movies that are like Crane Panda style or some stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah,
let's just call it Savage Killers. Also, calling it Savage Killers makes it sound a lot scarier and more deadly than the movie actually was.
Oh, yeah.
I think like 5 people died. That was it.
Well, so for my side of this episode, I did a little bit more digging into the history of kung fu movies, since this isn't a genre I'm super familiar with.
Ah, that's right.
And I know you're more familiar with it.
Yes.
The only martial arts films I'm a little bit more familiar with, if you want to call them martial arts films, are samurai films. Which,
I mean, you could classify them that way, I guess, if you don't want to be too technical.
The similarities between the two, they have a lot of kind of like the Bushido code. A lot of the martial arts have their own codes.
Yes.
And they kind of have a lot of parallels.
I also think that a good way of classifying kung fu movies, other than, the very blatantly obvious kung fu movies, is a heavy emphasis on the action part of the movie, and the plot and the character development kind of falls to the way, and you're also expected to stop believing in reality for a few seconds. Even for the more realistically fought kung fu movies, you're still expected to put aside some of your more realistic beliefs on how that fighting might have happened. And that's the point of the movie. Well,
and on top of that, originally Kung Fu films came in the 30s, I believe, and it was a counterculture to, or not counterculture, a counter to the, I might pronounce this wrong, wuxia films.
Yes.
And those were more fantasy based. Kung Fu are more contemporary, and then in the late 70s, it became more urbanistic and more modern, whereas a lot of the 70s films take place in a somewhat ancient but not super ancient China.
Yeah. Another big point of a lot of especially older kung fu, and I've seen it come back a little bit with movies like Ip Man. Was an emphasis on, I want to call it patriotism, but this idea of defending your home and your country and your family.
Yes.
And doing so by only training your body. And that was enough. That's another big key point. I don't know necessarily if the movie Kung Pow portrays that trope, but it kind of does at the beginning with him as an infant kung fu master. This is so silly.
The movie's kind of a parody, but at the same time, it feels like it fits in with the genre and stuff. It's not like a blatant parody like Scary Movie where it doesn't fit in the genre, where it's not really a horror film, but it plays on all the tropes. This one honestly is a kung fu film.
It does. It falls within the realm, like, and to be very, I don't know, brutal, I guess. It's not the worst kung fu movie I've watched this year.
No.
And that's coming from someone who my favorite kung fu movie of all time is a kung fu movie where I don't think there's a single piece of set in the whole movie. I'm pretty sure the entire thing is green screened and every single actor doesn't touch the ground the whole time. Yeah,
which, I mean, is more common with a lot of kung fu movies. I've seen some, I just haven't gone super in depth into them.
I would say that sort of like fantasy kung fu is probably a little bit more modern version. And this one definitely plays on more of the era of early Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, all of the original masters. You can definitely see where those parodies are coming from in this one.
With this film too, the main actor, Jimmy Wang Yu, he was actually the highest paid kung fu actor until Bruce Lee.
This is true.
So this guy was Bruce Lee before Bruce Lee.
Which is, I mean, and I do appreciate this movie being the written, directed, and acted the way it is because you can see how much this man actually loves kung fu movies.
Oh yeah, no, Steve Odekirk.
Yes.
Who he's done a lot of parody films, which is why this is perfect. He did thumb parody films.
He did. He's responsible for the movie Thumbs with an exclamation point. If you're a person about our age, you probably also remember him from things like Barnyard, Back to the Barnyard, Jimmy Neutron. He was pretty prevalent in those as well. He also did several movies that, like people like my dad probably remember.
Yeah, well, he was one of the writers for Patch Adams.
Yes,
which
he was.
Completely surprised my mom because I called her after, like, I was looking at his IMDb page just to kind of give a background to find out, like, what else has he done.
Yes.
And I saw that, and I called her up and I'm like, hey, Mom, guess what he also wrote? And she's like, I don't know. And she's like, wait, really?
Yep.
Well, and so he did have a love for this genre, obviously.
Yeah.
He looked through, he estimates about 100 films to find the right film.
And it shows. Like, the angles that this film is being, at the time, blue screened over. This wasn't even green screen technology. This was blue screen. So the camera angles that the original film had, like, that obviously played a huge role in it because if he was face first in the movie the whole time, you would have, I don't want to say lose something, because the point is that something was lost, because you can totally tell when it is him and when it is not him.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the point.
Yeah, no, any back shot, they didn't do anything. They couldn't do anything really for. So half the time you see an Asian man's face from the backside, and then the rest of the time you see his face.
And I'm sure it was intentional, because I can't imagine someone who's editing this movie this heavily not going scene by scene through it. There's, 2 different spots where we paused it and went, they didn't even bother to put his face on the guy.
No. Well, I mean, those were all, like, the back shots.
There was the one where he's falling down the waterfall, though, and we all had to pause it and go, wait, isn't that him?
Well, yeah, I mean, they couldn't really get that out.
No, so, like, but the fact that they knew that and went ahead and said, you know what? Yeah, let's just do it. This movie is fun. This movie is energetic. This movie is silly.
Yeah, well, so the intro is actually all new footage.
Yes, it is.
They did a really good job with finding people to match up with the characters if they had to use a stunt double.
They did. And it was also kind of impressive with kind of the limitation of new people. in this movie, for having completely redone this movie, the amount of like completely brand new characters, I think is like, what, 2 or 3?
Yes, there's
him, obviously.
Yeah, there's him, there's
50% of the time.
There's him, there's Uniboob, and there's the jukebox guy.
And jukebox guy.
Yeah.
And then, like, I guess if you want to stretch it, Cow, but...
And the titty flashes.
Yes, but...
That's a completely different person.
Yeah, no, so my husband watched the original with me, and we watched the whole way through, and he's like, weren't there titties in the first one we watched? There are no titties in the original. It is perfectly family friendly.
It's the 70s. They couldn't really do that without...
But you know what was in the original that I completely and totally thought had been added to Kung Pow?
What's that?
So the bad guy in this movie has the weird pyramids stuck on his body.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they're supposed... And this is in the original one, too. They are covering his sensitive pressure points. I don't know. His vulnerable spots is how they dubbed it in the movie I watched. And so the main actor in both movies spends a great deal of time in training to get his grip and finger strength up enough. And in the original, it's him combining crane style and tiger style to rip out these points. And so when he finally does it, he gets the bad guy and he rips the points out. The blood that comically squirts out like a good 10 seconds late while the bad guy is laughing, I thought was put in for Kung Pow.
Nope.
It is not.
Nope, and I knew that from the commentary.
Like, it happens, and especially in the original one, which is trying to be a more or less serious movie, the comedic timing of the blood squirting out of this man's body is just gold.
I mean, it's kind of like your standard kung fu, really bad martial arts film where, like, someone gets punched and blood just flies everywhere. Yes.
However... You could tell that, especially back in, what was it, the 70s, when the original movie was made, there's just some guy with a plunger and a hose standing off screen, and that guy just went to town on the plunger, because blood doesn't splatter. It doesn't leak. It shoots like a water gun across the set. It's gold.
Well, so with them adding and removing shots, they had to be a bit creative.
Yes.
So... one of my favorites is that waterfall scene.
Mm-hmm.
When he's looking up and talking to him, that's a parking lot in Mexico.
Yes.
Or South America. Wherever, I think they went to Mexico to do the shooting for all the other stuff. So, like, they used really low budget, especially, like, the Lion King scene.
Yeah.
It was shot in his backyard with a camcorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they used a fan to get the wind effect and everything going.
That sounds about right. But also, like, you have to scale down your special effects to match the just pure grainy quality of the original. Mm-hmm. And even though the original isn't necessarily a bad kung fu movie, it's still from the 70s. It itself, I believe, had a pretty low budget.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the reason he shot in his backyard, I think he said, because they had ran out of budget.
This movie was only budgeted for, what, 10 something?
Oh, and it did poorly. Like,
I mean, it made more money than it cost to make. So, you know, success, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your definition of success. We would call that success because they made their money and then some back.
Yes.
Because it was estimated $10 million budget for this film.
Which is nothing.
And opening weekend, they only made $70 million, but they grossed $16 million.
Which, not bad.
No.
Not bad. Like, I've been to the movie, I have given my movie money to much worse performing movies than that. Mm-hmm. With a bigger budget than that, too.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that, especially, I think the true golden way to watch this movie, though, is to watch it on the DVD version. Mm-hmm. Because the DVD version is, like, living its prime of DVD menu life.
Early 2000s.
Yes.
Like, early 2000s TV spots and everything. You got the
you got
weird
the
cutouts.
Like, you got the extra, like, scenes within menu items to, like, click on. Things randomly happen on the DVD menu screens that nowadays we would be like, oh, this is so distracting. How do I get to the movie? Nowadays, I feel like movies only have, like, what, 3 or 4 screen options? Yeah. This one, we were getting lost in the menus.
I will say with this one, it's not the worst I've seen. I have this version of Memento that I got it because it looks like a clipboard.
Ooh.
But you have to go through like answering questions to get to the menu.
Oh,
and
no.
I accidentally started the movie with the director's commentary, watching the movie for the first time.
Oh no.
And so I had to look up on the internet a guide to even get to play the movie.
No, this one's not that bad.
No, it's not.
This one, especially if you were a kid who grew up, like, I grew up playing the DVD video game that came with the Harry Potter movies originally.
I did not know they came with the game.
They came with a game on the DVD. I think up until like the third or fourth one, they had games, and it's so good. I miss those days. And this movie doesn't have a game on it, but it does have like a hidden feature. It has lots of menus. It has lots of fun things to interact with on the DVD menu, which honestly is probably the best way to watch this movie. Because once you're done, it is really enjoyable to flip through and watch like a 30-second or a minute and a half long clip of the director being like, "Yep, I love Kung Fu. Hiya!"
Yeah. No, they, like we said, we can see the love in this movie. It's just
for sure.
a shame that it wasn't as well received.
I feel like this movie would, like, if this movie was reintroduced to the world now, this movie would do phenomenally.
Oh yeah.
This movie's humor is very on target for a lot of people who like things like Men in Tights, the
Princess Bride,
like the over-the-top humor.
Over the top, a little tongue-in-cheek at the same time, too.
Yes,
because...
tonguey. By the way...
Tongue-in-cheek.
By the way, can we talk about tonguey for a second?
Yes, please.
I hate tonguey so much.
He's awful.
So tonguey is... I take that back. Tonguey is the fourth original character in this movie.
Yes.
Tonguey is a CGI face that they put sometimes on the end of his tongue. And it is what makes him the chosen one?
Which is him making fun of the fact that all the chosen ones always have, like, some scar or some birthmark in the shape of a symbol.
Yeah, which, like, I get, that's hilarious, but it's just his face. Like, for those of you who remember,
It's what he did with Thumb Wars, basically.
Yes!
But he put it on his tongue.
Oh, it's so bad. And, like, Tonguey eats at certain points, and I can't. I don't like it. It's so funny, but it's so disgusting. I hate Tonguey so much.
I loved him as a kid. As an adult, I'm indifferent.
But he's also not in the movie enough for me to be like, all right, this is a ruin. Like, especially if you're even more anti-Tonguey than I am. Like, it's not enough Tonguey for you to hate Tonguey to the point where you won't watch the movie.
Yeah, no.
But it is enough Tonguey for you to forget that Tonguey is there sometimes, and then he opens his mouth and surprise, it's Tonguey, and shit, I forgot Tonguey was a thing.
Yes, he's
he's
there.
Yep.
Well, speaking of some of the effects in the movie,
yes.
One, there's that CGI cow.
The CGI cow was pretty great.
A lot of the CGI has not aged super well in this movie.
I don't think the CGI originally was done well on purpose.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't bad to begin with. I mean, this movie's from 2002. It's not...
And this is coming from the same man who already knew what a CGI cow could do with Back to the Barnyard. Mm-hmm. But he purposefully chose a cow and a background scenery, because I believe the scenery, for the most part, is all blue or green screened.
No, in that scene, he's actually in the field.
He's actually in the field. So he's just got a CGI cow that he is fighting. With a couple of, I believe, special effect parts of the cow. Like,
yes,
I believe they
practical titties.
Yeah, I believe they did make a squishy udder for him to punch, which,
And squirt milk at a specific scene.
There's a lot of scenes that it squirts milk. There's a lot of milk squirting in this cow.
The one thing I appreciate, though, is that they tried to take into consideration if a cow could fight like a human,
yes.
How would the cow move? It doesn't... The CGI is bad.
It is.
But it feels like if a cow was walking on 2 feet...
How would it walk?
Yes.
Yes. I agree there. The cow at no point moved in such a way that you thought to yourself, that cow has just dislocated its own shoulder.
No.
It does move like how a fake CGI cow should move for Kung Fu. The ew for me is the amount of milk squirting / udder punching.
Oh, yeah.
The squishiness is what gets me. The idea cracks me up, but the just flabbiness of the prop that they used is kind of gross to me.
I just realized why you picked milk for your drink today.
There you go.
Milk's disgusting to begin with.
Well, and then we watched this movie as a group, which you should do. This movie is much better as a group watch. It's a perfect party movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we were watching this scene, and there is a specific point where they pay homage to The Matrix that I believe you had some choice words to say about.
I don't remember what I said. I was having a hard time between the drink your husband made.
He's just learned to make new mixed drink. He's very proud of it.
I know he is. It was very good. I just hadn't had anything in my stomach, so it hit me really quickly. Yes. And then on top of that, the Szechuan cooking was...
Too spicy for you?
A little bit.
Weak
just
baby.
a bit. Oh, shush. Shush.
But I distinctly remember you being very upset by the appearance of the Matrix scene.
I think I think not so much at the scene, just that it's been done so many times now.
It has, but I think, especially from someone who, like, I watched The Matrix way later than The Matrix were cool. Like,
same here.
Like, way, way, way later. But because this movie is Kung Pow, I agree with the inclusion of the Matrix scene, because how else can you possibly over-the-top kung fu this without putting people on strings?
Yes. Yeah. And then there's that little behind-the-scenes footage at the end where the cow gives milk to another guy.
Yes.
Like, just as an actor-to-actor thing. Which...
Yes. Very. I mean, you might as well.
Yeah.
Might as well have fun with this cow thing that you made. The other thing that I appreciate, especially because it's another one of those things like Tonguey, where you forget that it's a part of his backstory, is so he runs away / rolls down a hill as a baby. Which,
so cute.
So cute. And then dumps him off the side of a cliff. This part was probably the only part that our friend Erica, who's kind of a more picky movie watcher, and this is the only part I saw her, like, truly laugh at, was the baby doll rolling down the hill.
To be fair, I think she spent a good chunk of her time on her phone. This was definitely not...
This is not one of her movies.
No.
She's much more of a Downton Abbey sort of person, but she did get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
And so once he gets done rolling down the hill, as an adult, I think, he quickly narrates that he is then raised by small wild rodents.
And parties with the desert animals.
And the desert animal partying, unfortunately, does not make a comeback in the movie. But occasionally the rodent thing does. And I forget that part of the backstory every time. So I have to sit there and be like, what is he doing?
It only happens, like, 3 times. The gopher chucks,
Yes, there's that.
He does, like, this weird, like, chipmunk style. And then the tiny net.
Oh, well, and then there's one point where he jumps out in the middle of the road, I think, and just starts wiggling his nose like a chipmunk. And I was very confused for a good second.
Yeah, no. Well, so another thing with that, so that scene where he's coming in, like, he's walking.
Yes.
There's parts where the dog's next to him, and then the dog's not next to him. That was done on purpose to create an inconsistency.
Yes.
Same with, like, a lot of the shots were done inconsistently. Like, I am a great magician.
Yes.
Your shirt is red. That was because there was 2 scenes that fit so perfectly together, but the only thing that changed was the dude was wearing a red shirt in one scene and black in the next.
And you know what? The fact that they didn't attempt to hide the inconsistencies like that, in fact, they brought it to your attention. Like, I probably wouldn't have noticed the guy's shirt the first time I watched this movie. It probably could have flown right over my head, and I would have not noticed until, like, the 3rd or 4th time I watched it. But the fact that they pointed it out really emphasizes the humor in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that this movie consistently is at a constant giggle for, like, my humor level was very enjoyable.
Yeah, no. And I mean, this is a family film for me. Like, we probably picked this up when we were in Germany because that's when DVDs were becoming more available. And we absolutely loved it. I mean, that's part of my tradition with my dad is normally we watch really bad movies every time he's in town. Unfortunately, this time we haven't because I've been so busy and tired. So
I mean, sometimes it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
The other thing that I appreciate in this movie is the naming choices for everyone. as someone who really struggles to pick up people's names, I appreciate that the main character's name is Chosen One. I appreciate that the dog's name is Dog. And then everyone else, every time I re-look up their names, I get a nice giggle. Because their names are all plays on either a traditional name or a name that could potentially sound traditional, but they all have something to do with their characteristics.
Even the dog barking track is off, by the way.
It is, and that cracks me up.
It's glorious.
That's probably the best dubbing part of the whole movie.
Yeah, which, I mean, they really show, again...
Yeah.
You have that feeling when, like, it's a blatant I can use words. A blatant cash grab.
Yeah. This one, on the other hand, though, you could tell he knew that he was spending money to make a thing that he loved, and he just hoped other people loved it too. Yeah,
well, in the commentary, he mentions making a trilogy out of this, and they propose or give a teaser for the sequel.
So I looked into that, because I was also kind of bummed that there isn't actually a sequel yet. So recently... within the last, I think a couple years.
Like 2015, I think.
Yeah, 2015, he announced it, that he wants to make a sequel for it. Someone interviewed him and was like, is this still a thing? Because, this movie's kind of gaining more traction. A lot more people like it now. And he's like, no, it's still on the table. I just need to get around to it.
Yeah, and he mentioned that he wouldn't do it as a kung fu film. He'd do it as a spaghetti western film.
Which would be perfect. To just kind of work your way through the genres of ridiculousness.
Yeah, which, I mean, I would like to see more because he obviously has this love, but he's kind of getting there in age. So, well, actually, that would be perfect if he was like this old dude in a western.
It would be hilarious. And the other thing that I think even now he could still do is... Yeah, he did a lot of his own quote-unquote stunts for this movie.
There was 2,000 effect shots.
Yes. The part of the movie that looked potentially the most dangerous, they had a fake leg on a stick, and they kind of run behind him, thrusting the leg into the camera scene. So that way he doesn't actually have to attempt to, bend his leg up and over behind his head and into these crazy positions. They just have a leg on a stick.
And how he actually wanted the movie to end before the trailer started was Godzilla stepping in too. But I think they removed it for part so that way it could tease for the sequel.
Yeah, and also as we've learned from our Godzilla watching, the Godzilla name is well loved, and despite him being a master of the parody art, I do think they probably would have given the frowny stamp to him for that.
I think it would have been interesting if he had used Gamera or something, but
might have gotten away with it then.
Yeah, which Gamera was a Godzilla ripoff to begin with.
Exactly.
But so the one thing that interested me in regards to this film is that playing on the tropes, I started looking at other kung fu movies, and this is on a little bit of a tangent in regards to what's his name? Jimmy Wang Yu.
Yes.
I didn't realize that I'd actually seen him in a movie before.
Oh, yeah?
I looked into his history, and I watched 2 films called One-Armed Swordsman and Return of One-Armed Swordsman, which I didn't realize were a big thing. It was a big franchise. Mm-hmm. I had seen him in a Japanese film, Zatoichi Meets the One-Armed Swordsman.
There you go.
So... got my connection to films I know. But I thought it was interesting because we know Bruce Lee.
Oh, yes.
But we don't know him.
Yeah, and especially from someone who really loves the kung fu movie genre, if you start really watching them, it is... You start seeing the same people over and over and again. You just kind of break it up by decades, really. Which I kind of like, because... even in this weird kung fu world where none of these movies for the most part are connected, you already kind of know that character's trope. Mm-hmm. Because for the most part, the actors and the kung fu masters will play kind of the same role over and over again because that's what they're good at. And so I think Kung Pow kind of plays on that a little bit by having by having himself as the main character, he's someone that, for the most part, very easily recognizable, stands out in the movie quite a lot, and so it's very easy to tell that this is supposed to be the main character. Whereas when you're watching the original ones, you know who the main character is because you've already seen him 100 times. You know that he's going to be the good guy, and for the most part, probably going to win.
Yeah. And so that's one thing is, like, for me, I haven't watched enough Chinese films to really start recognizing people in them. But I had a similar thing with Japanese films when I started getting into Akira Kurosawa's work.
Definitely. It's a very similar, like, genre in that aspect.
And that's the studio systems at the time, too. Like, you had your big name stars. Like, they had Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura.
Exactly.
And then, like, in the U.S., you had, what's that Western dude's name?
That Western dude. You're talking about...
John Wayne. I had to think of it because of John Wayne Gacy.
Oh, no, that's not the same person at all.
He was named after him, though.
But yes, it's very similar to how the old Westerns used to be, or even like old TV shows used to be, where you kind of had your people who always played the bad guy, you had the people who always played the good guy, and sometimes they even be playing multiple TVs or shows or movies all at the same time. But that was part of the enjoyableness, I think. That's part of, like... Hi, Charlie. You're noisy.
Always
noisy. But that was...
It's 5:30. Go away.
No, starving to death. You don't feed him. But I think part of the, like, especially in the nostalgia goggles, for a lot of people with those specific genres of movies, which I don't think we really have anything comparable nowadays. We have so many really good actors. I think the closest that I can kind of think of is kind of in the Marvel world, where one actor is playing the same character over and over again.
We do have Marvel. I would say it's more prevalent. I would say the action adventure films of today are what the Westerns and the Kung Fu movies used to be.
Yeah.
Like the Fast and the Furious.
True.
Like,
yeah. There's a handful of people you know who are going to be in that movie. You know what character they're going to play. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the joy of that movie.
Like, I don't know those films. I've never seen a single one of them.
Oh, we'll fix that. Don't worry.
But I at least know Vin Diesel's in it. I know Paul Walker was for parts of them.
Well, and Vin Diesel's a really good example, because I feel like Vin Diesel kind of embodies that old notion. So if Vin Diesel's in a movie, 9 times out of 10, I already know. Like, I don't even have to see the trailer. I don't need to know what the movie's called. I already know what the movie's probably about. I know that there's going to be some action. I know there's probably going to be at least one explosion, probably a car chase, and somebody's going to be punched really hard. But I'm okay with that. In fact, I specifically seek out Vin Diesel. He's my favorite actor.
Actually, I haven't seen a lot with him. I think I've seen Pitch Black. And
I love Pitch Black.
I do too.
The entire Riddick Chronicles. I think I own all of them now. There's a couple of animated ones I think I might be missing.
I think I have the entire collection.
Oh, I love. But even that movie, which is arguably one of his more dark and horror-based movies, is still the same trope. He's kind of the good guy, kind of the bad guy.
An almost anti-hero.
Almost an anti-hero, but also, questionable morals here and there.
Anti-hero.
Gonna punch something. Gonna out-muscle his way through a situation. And that's okay. That's what I want. That's why he's my favorite actor, because I know exactly what I'm going to get every time I watch him.
And it's like when we go and watch bad Kung Fu movies. We know exactly what we're getting into. Like, I watched one. I enjoyed it a little bit more than I thought I would.
Which one? Do you remember?
Kung Fu master named Drunk Cat.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, he knows all his martial arts. He knows all the styles from watching movies.
Yes. That's a good one.
It is, but it's all... It's good at parts. Just because, like, it really devolves into, like, that generic Kung Fu movie at the end, where instead of, like, him using, like, all his... I mean, we don't know the actual styles. We don't know the martial arts, but,
no.
like... about halfway through the movie, it becomes a crime movie and it kind of loses the plot a bit. And it also might just be the dubbing over that doesn't translate. Because maybe he didn't learn it from the movies or something. I don't know.
Well, and that's kind of also the fun of Kung Fu movies, which I also think Kung Pow does a good job of, especially because they did spend so much time and effort redubbing themselves and the entire movie, which was already poorly dubbed. Like the girl with the swirly sideburns who's in the movie, she's the main love interest in both movies, I think. Her voice in the Kung Pow movie she's the one who goes, wee wee, champion. Her voice in the dubbed American version from the 1970s is really close to that as well. Yes.
Her actress's name is Ling Ling.
Yes. Ling Ling's voice in the American dubbed original movie is very close to the Kung Pow dubbed version.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That's impressive because Udekirk did the voices for like almost everyone.
Well, and I think that was part of the ploy, though, was because, you know, the American dub, especially when they were brought over, the guy dubbing it was probably a very similar situation where they've got a limited number of people. They want to get this movie out. It's probably a DVD release only. Mm-hmm. I don't think this movie made it to the theaters.
No, it did. It had an opening weekend.
It did?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It earned like...
no, not Kung Pow.
Oh,
Savage Killers.
Oh, yeah. I have no clue.
Yeah, but that's kind of... I think the reason he picked it was... at this point, no one knows.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of, like, the fun of Kung Pow is because it's not that far off from how some of the old ones actually were done.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that is the thing. Back in the day, they just would bring them over here and just dub over them and just pump out as many as they could.
And it really does sound like it's just some guy in his garage, because like all of the sound effects too, like they didn't even feel like they bothered to go get a chain and swing it around for the bad guy's cool claw. For Betty's cool claw weapon that he's got. The guy just kind of sits there and goes with his hands. And none of it makes any sense. The sounds make no sense. But that's how it was released at the time.
Yeah, even like the intermission in the movie. It feels like it...
I love a movie with an intermission in it.
And this one fits so perfectly too.
It does.
And it was all because they couldn't show what they'd filmed for the escape scene to keep their rating, because he had arrow pointing to his mouth that said like insert here or something. And so to keep whatever rating the movie got, they had to remove that. And so he had time to fill. And so I just threw in an intermission and you cut back to it and he's escaped.
Yeah. Which, I don't know. I also think that some of the editing choices that he made like that also reflect what the Western audiences would have gotten with these older Kung Fu movies. I've watched a lot of them. I love this genre. And even the newer ones where I have Netflix subtitles on, I've got the original movie subtitles on, and they've dubbed over it, I'm still missing parts of the story because there's no way to truly translate all of this, and especially in a way that condenses it down like how dubbing would like it to be. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of the story that you just don't know.
And that was part of like his issue, is like he had to fill in some of the voices, and that's why we get the and like all the random voices is because
so many random noises.
He just had to fill it in. Like the ventriloquists.
The ventriloquists were hilarious.
And when they're swinging in the movie, if I remember right, because he said in the commentary that they're actually dead in the movie.
They are. They're one of the few people who die in this Kung Fu movie.
But he chooses to make them be singing as they're upside down. I swing a bit more.
Yeah. Which honestly, especially if you do get around and get a chance to watch the original, you cannot see that scene without telling yourself, they're just resting.
Oh, yeah.
They're fine.
No, and I actually probably will start doing a deeper dive into some of the older films. Because you know I love old movies.
Yes.
So, like, just...
And the old Kung Fu movies, especially if you can find one with an okay dubbing to it, it does have a really good window into what was happening at around that time period. So example being the movie this was based off of, Savage Killers, the entire Betty, the bad guy who I never got his actual name. I'm going to keep calling him Betty because I can remember Betty.
That's all he is to me.
So Betty is a bad guy who's hired by the Japanese in this movie.
Oh.
Because the Japanese in this movie are making their way up and they are slowly killing all of the kung fu schools and masters so that way there's no one to resist them as they march their way up the continent.
Which has quite a bit of historical context to it that I wouldn't have gotten from that at all.
Yeah.
Well, at least watching Kung Pao's version.
No, and I do think that Kung Pow was probably right in cutting that out. Like, it would not make any sense to a Western audience, especially if you're not super well versed in your, like, inclusive world history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most kids in American schools know that there was conflict. They don't really understand all of the feelings and, like, what actually happened with that.
Mm-hmm.
And those movies are pretty good light into the fantasy reactions to what was happening back then.
Yeah, that's like, I think the movie's called Men Behind the Sun. That movie is... it's heavy.
Yeah.
It involves a Japanese Unit 731.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, because I actually didn't find out about this until like a couple years ago, this is basically the Japanese equivalent and Chinese equivalent of the concentration camps of World War II.
And I do think that while a lot of kung fu movies do make reference to hard times, and again, that's just one example. There's a whole like subgenres of kung fu putting it in different time periods throughout history, but they always do kind of manage to gravitate themselves towards harder times or really hard times, depending on what genre and era they picked. But most and there's always exceptions to the rule, obviously, but most kung fu movies do approach those hard times with this sense of hope and optimism that comes with a fantasy relief film, which is part of the reason I think they've managed to keep the genre going as prolifically as it has been, and not just keep it going in their movie theaters and their audiences, but it has become a staple of American households now, too.
Yeah. No, and...
Like, I remember distinctly growing up watching Jackie Chan's animated films, and this is the groundwork, not Kung Pow, but the overarching concept.
Yeah, and I think in the U.S., after Bruce Lee's sudden death, like, if he had been stuck around, I think Kung Fu would have had a more serious tone to it.
Probably.
Whereas Jackie Chan style, and I've talked with OG Philip about this before.
Yes.
Jackie Chan style is a very comedic. He's almost a prop comic because he uses a lot of his environment with him, which is really cool.
Yes,
but a lot of his films really have that kind of joking undertone. At least what we probably were exposed to.
No, that was actually part of the style that he developed for his Western audiences. From what I remember, and again, Jackie Chan's another one of those actors who I seek out. I love Jackie Chan movies, even his really silly ones. Like, I distinctly remember watching his animated cartoon and absolutely loving the shit out of that thing. So, yes, that one. The animated Jackie Chan TV
Searching
show.
for the amulets.
So many amulets. But I loved that show.
I did too.
But even as a kid, that wasn't my first introduction to Jackie Chan.
He didn't do the voice of himself in it?
No, but, like, he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
He has other things to do. But, like, even as a kid, that wasn't my first introduction to kung fu movies. It was his actual movies that I first watched because, a lot of the times we see him getting beat up and stuff like, and, getting beat down on by the bad guys, but that's part of his, again, Jackie Chan's a good example of, like, that character trope. You know who Jackie Chan is going to play in every movie Jackie Chan is in. He's going to play Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
But part of his trope is that he shows vulnerability. And a lot of these older kung fu movies, that's part of it. And it kind of disappeared into the newer ones where a lot of the, like, punches don't seem to hit real hard. People can very much Dragon Ball Z take a punch.
Yeah.
Whereas the older ones, and kind of Jackie Chan's style reflects that, you feel pain for these people. Like, they show actual pain when they are hurt. The weapons dig into them and cause bleeding, and that really does affect how their arms are moving and using. And you can kind of see that in Kung Po's parody, because there's that one scene where he gets pressure pointed, I think, and he gets floppy arms.
Yeah. A paralyzer. Another paralyzer.
And then he just has floppy arms that he's like noodling around to trying to hit him with. But it's that sort of showing vulnerability that kind of addresses the older versions of these movies and kind of how Jackie Chan has kept going with that sort of like, those punches do something to you.
And I feel in the U.S., he and Bruce Lee and Jet Li have actually really brought like a sense of realism to the martial arts.
Definitely.
But I feel that we haven't had a really good martial arts film in a long time. Like, we have like Rush Hour, Ip Man, which I'm not saying Rush Hour is a kung fu film. I'm saying
it definitely is a kung fu film.
It has its moments with kung fu elements.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, though, we are starting to see a new actor or kung fu master rise up with the movie Ip Man. So the main gentleman who plays in that is Donnie Yen. And Donnie Yen is becoming pretty prolific actor. He was in the new Star Wars movies as one of the Kung Fu Jedi. He was a Kung Fu Jedi. Let's be real here.
He pulled inspiration from Zatoichi.
Yeah. Everything goes back to Zatoichi eventually.
Yeah, I mean, there's 26? Yeah, there's 26 movies with one guy playing Zatoichi the whole time, so.
Yes, but I do think that, like, he's kind of the person I'm looking at right now and thinking he's the next guy who's going to transform the kung fu genre, even though he is doing these other movies.
Because unfortunately, Jackie Chan is getting on there in age. I heard, like, the last big movie he did, it was really good, but you could really see that he has...
Well, and part of the, like, kung fu world part is a lot of them take pride in doing their own stunts and their own punches and kicks, and that takes a toll on your body, even if you're doing it safely.
Yeah, Philip and I were talking about it where... like, I forget who we were talking about. We were talking, I think it might have been, we were talking about Jet Li or someone.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure it was Jet Li. But they were talking about, like, the filming they do in the U.S. is different than how they do it in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, they actually go through, like, the full scene of the choreograph. But in the U.S., most of the people only know, like, one or two moves, and they can remember that for a second. So they film a few seconds, cut, teach them the next one and keep going. And I think that, especially with like the rise of the MMA and everything, or even a wider range of the martial arts, people are more interested in it more than ever now.
I would agree so.
Because I mean, we see elements of it in like Taken or any of our modern spy movies. They've always trained. They've all trained in judo or.
Batman's a good example of it. Like, even early 90s Batman was a master at kung fu.
Yeah.
And, like, granted, you know, animated Batman and also new Batman's kung fu is questionable on how authentic it is, but that was a staple part of, like, a kid's idea of a superhero / a well-trained person knows kung fu. Yeah.
No. And, I mean, I as still being somewhat new to the genre, I want to get more into it. Like, I mean, I watch a lot of movies, but I've been in kind of a rut of, like, watching Yakuza films for a long time, or women revenge stories. Those are kind of been my big two for a while now.
Yeah, and I do think that the kung fu genre, while there's clearly always been people who absolutely love it and have been with it since the beginning, especially in America, who they actually remember the Jet Li movies, they remember the original Bruce Lee's, they remember early Jackie Chan.
Bruce Lee's like all I've seen.
We'll work on that. But I also think that just because these are the big names here right now, I know that genre, because, like, again, I love this genre. I love watching all of the different variations, no matter where it comes from. I love watching the Korean adaptations, the Japanese adaptations on this genre. And so I know there's other people out there right now who are doing this. They're doing it really well, and they're taking the same level of pride and effort in their practice that those original masters did.
Yes.
And I do think we're going to see more of them
and
seeping over.
even taking it to the American side, pro wrestling.
Yes.
I know Batista's getting a bunch of roles now, and he's a good actor. Like I'm enjoying what I've seen him in. He's kind of taking that comedic role, which I mean kind of plays
fair.
off how Jackie Chan got into it. But I know he's starting to take more serious roles on top of that. Actually, no, I watched this really bad Hong Kong film where they go to there's an ancient pot that he's given by this kid's given to it by his master.
Yes.
And
I think I know which one you're talking about.
the one where like the princess comes out of it,
Yes.
they leave her there. They go to ancient China and everyone speaks English. And
Yes.
Batista's the bad guy.
Yes, that one.
I can't remember. It's not worth watching.
I mean, it depends on your idea of worth watching.
It was
But I also think that, like, we are starting to see this mix between the martial arts world, both in the Western sense with the MMA, the WWE side, and also the original Kung Fu and martial arts side.
Mm-hmm.
Those two worlds are starting to bleed together. A good example is, you've seen It Man, right?
I've seen the first one, yes.
You need to watch the third one where Mike Tyson's the bad guy.
You've brought this up many times.
It kills me every time because the first one is so serious and so beautifully shot and like so wonderfully choreographed, and then the third one is also beautifully shot and beautifully choreographed with Mike Tyson speaking English.
It's like
I love it.
It's like Rocky fighting Mr. T.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is exactly like that, and I love it. But I think that we've started to see more serious kung fu films in recent years, and they've gotten they've been well received by a lot of audience. So I do think we're starting to see more of just the entirety of the genre show back up again, which I'm excited for. I love this genre. I want to see more. I want to see more new ones too.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm new, so we'll see where I end up with it. It's gonna take me a while to get caught up, but. One thing I do want to talk about is the ending to this movie.
Oh, yes.
So, we're going to probably spoil this for you guys.
I mean, is this movie really spoilable? If it's a ridiculous thing that you can think of, this movie has it in it.
So, yeah. Which is why we're going to bring it up. There is this overarching evil council.
The overarching evil council. Who is the overarching evil council, Nico? Is it maybe...
Aliens! Aliens. So many aliens. Always aliens.
But not
always.
Not just any aliens.
French aliens. Ho ho ho. Baguettes.
I think when the aliens showed up... So just so that you are all aware, Nico loves aliens very much.
I do.
And he brings it up quite a bit at our group activities. Whether or not that they are supposed to be at the group activities. And so when the alien ships showed up on the scene on the movie and Nico got really excited about the French aliens, both of the gentlemen in our group who go to guys' night and have to listen to alien talk a lot more than the girls do.
I have gone like 2 months without alien talk to them.
I think Phil also attempted to curl into a small ball when the aliens finally showed up.
I was specifically banned from not talking about aliens at the wedding.
I mean, fair. It's a wedding. But
yeah.
But I appreciate the alien ending because the council could have ended up being a lot of things. And especially with the original movie, those of us who are going to do deep dives on it eventually could have found a way to tie that back with something relating to the original movie, which I don't think would have been a good point for this movie. The whole point of this movie is escapism, is fantasy, and it is ridiculousness.
It's parody.
It is that is its whole goal. And so for the fact that the secret council to be French aliens kind of completely out of left field side tackles you.
Also, Tongi can speak French.
Tongi, I mean, that is also, I think, the only thing Tongi, says in the whole movie. I don't think Tongi actually talks except for that point, right?
I don't know. He makes a lot of weird noises.
He does. He
can also throw up too. There was a cutscene.
Yeah,
where...
I saw that. That was awful.
Oh yeah, no, because they put it in the trailer at the end. They reused a lot of the footage they couldn't use. Man,
Tongi really grosses me out on so many levels, but. But the fact that the aliens are aliens, which good start. Mm-hmm. Now, how do we make aliens more ridiculous? Apparently, we make them French, and we make them flying pyramids.
I mean, they were ancient aliens before ancient aliens pulled it, which all that's bullshit.
Well, yeah.
People just found the best way to stack stones without them falling over.
Yes, as an architect, I do appreciate Ancient Aliens. I love that show because
It's,
to me, it's very humorous. But
it's a very good parody of fiction.
it is a very good
Or a parody of history.
Yes.
Fiction.
Yes. And so the way the movie ends like that, and it ends in such a way that you feel a little bit of a cliffhanger. You're waiting for movie 2, but you don't need movie 2. You just are waiting for it patiently.
No.
Was a perfect ending to a parody.
Yeah, and I mean, that's how a lot of parodies end, I feel, is that
Yeah.
cliffhanger, but
Well, and I also think that a lot of parodies end that way. And like you said earlier, you can tell the money grabby parodies from the more authentic loves of the genre. And the normal endings to that, you kind of end wanting more, like you feel like answers are not answered. You feel very empty at the end. This one left it open because he genuinely wants to make more. And also, how else are you supposed to end this ridiculousness?
yeah, and for me, parody films of like the ones I've seen, I don't watch a whole lot of them just because they're not good for the most part.
No,
and they're not even entertaining good. Like the last entertaining but kind of fell off the deep end was Scary Movie 3.
Scary Movie 3, I think, is kind of where the franchise you can end. You
yeah.
can stop watching there.
It was funny. It was enjoyable. Was it really a parody of horror films? Not fully.
Anymore. Yeah, and that's kind of the other thing about parody movies. And part of the reason I think why he mentioned that the next one he wants to make it a spaghetti western, is because you can only really parody a thing so many times before it's not really a parody of that thing anymore. It's just a continuation of your silly story.
Exactly.
And the fact that he had the good sense to end this the way he did, with it being outrageous, with it being silly, but also open-ended, but not so open-ended that you're upset, I think that speaks volumes to his ability as a writer.
Yeah. No, I hope they make a sequel, but I also am okay if they don't.
Same.
So what would you give this movie rating? Or what would you rate this movie, Chris?
I would rate this movie a 3 to 10 friends required to play.
Yeah.
This movie is great in groups. This movie is hilarious. If you have really low humor standards like I do, you should watch this movie by yourself with a bowl of popcorn. You'll have a great time. But I think for the general audience, this is a perfect party movie.
Yeah, for me, trying to look at it without it being like a family tradition to watch, I would say give the movie a go.
It definitely deserves at least one watch. The quotability is pretty great.
Oh yeah, no, the quotability is fantastic.
It will keep your family just quoting goofy lines back and forth for at least a week.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you're at home alone, I still don't recommend watching it alone. This is a group movie.
Definitely.
As my feeling towards most comedy films are, there's not a lot of comedies that I truly enjoy by myself.
No, this is a trash comedy. That's probably why I would watch it by myself. My standards for comedy are very strange and very low. But, again, great group movie.
Mm-hmm.
You and your friends will be able to yell at each other, wee, 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 and chosen one, for like a whole week.
Yeah.
It is, and like you said, this is a really good tradition movie, especially like for a family. This movie is a great, like, throw it in at whatever family event you want to insert here.
Have your kids watch it young. You'll hate yourself for it.
Yeah. Maybe if you have children at the quotable age, they will love this movie and you will hate it. That's a good way to put it.
Yes. So, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Wee-oo-pew-wee-oo. I've got some yellow liquid for your popcorn. And it's not dairy, too.